everyone, I'm Jen Lucas, managing editor of the Knitting Circle, and I want to welcome you to today's Facebook Live video. In this video, we're going to be making something really cool. We're going to be making this knitted fall garland. I have it here. I have all my leaves spread out, but we're going to be making 3 different leaves for this. I have this oak leaf, this elm leaf, and this maple leaf, and they're actually very easy. This pattern is probably more of an intermediate pattern just because of the shaping that we're going to be doing, but don't let that scare you away if you are a beginner or an adventurous beginner or just diving into intermediate. I'm going to show you everything you know to make these, and you can always come back and watch this video later if you need a reminder on how to do any of the steps. Before I get started, I just want to remind everybody that you can go ahead and download the pattern. In the description box, wherever you're watching this video, there will be a link to the pattern that you can go ahead and download, and you can follow along with me today and then go forth and make your own. In addition to that, you'll notice that there is a chat box. And so use that chat box if you have any questions along the way. If you have any questions about anything specific I'm doing here, let me know. But also use that chat box just to say hello. Let us know where you're watching from. Maybe if you're knitting or crocheting or crafting while you're watching, we'd also love to know what you're working on. That's really a fun way to get an idea of what our viewers like to make. So I'm going to go ahead and flip my camera down so that you can see my hands, and we will get started with our fall garland. So for this project, what's really great is that it does not take a lot of yarn. So here we can take a closer look now at our leaves. And so here are the 3 leaves we're going to be making, and we're going to be making 2 of each for this particular garland. So it has 6 leaves total. But what's really nice is that these are really easy to make, and you can make them with leftover yarn, really. And so you can make as many leaves as you like for your garland. So let's talk about the materials real quick. So to start, you're going to need some bulky weight yarn. And here I just have some bulky weight yarn that is wool. And for the oak leaves, you need 10 yards per leaf, or 20 yards total. For the elm leaves, which are the green ones that I did, you also will need 20 yards total, or 10 yards per leaf. And then for the maple leaves, the red leaves, you are going to need 24 yards of bulky weight yarn total, or 12 yards per leaf. So I've listed in the pattern the total amount of yardage for making 2 of each, but I've also then, divided it out for you so you know how much each leaf takes. So if you want to make more or you want to make less, you know exactly how much yarn you need. But again, this is a great one for leftovers. I just picked some fall colors here. Let me bring in my other 2 here. I don't know. I just like this color combo a lot. It just felt kind of fall-like to me. So that's what I picked, but obviously you can pick whatever you want. And really, we're talking about making these in a bulky weight yarn, but this is one of those projects that you can make in a different weight yarn. Just make sure that you're using the appropriate size needle for that yarn. And remember that changing the yarn and changing the needle size is going to change the finished size of your leaves. But that could be a really fun way to play around with this pattern. In addition to the yarn, obviously we need some knitting needles. So here we have US size 9 knitting needles, or the size needed to obtain the gauge for the pattern. Now, for this particular pattern, you don't necessarily have to get gauge. Obviously, we're making leaves, but just keep in mind, if you're not getting the gauge that I've listed in the pattern, it is going to require a different amount of yarn. And once again, your leaves will turn out to be a different size. So I have a US size 9 here. I like to pretty much always knit on circular needles, even though we're knitting back and forth in rows. But you can obviously use your regular old straight needles. This is a 16-inch circular, whatever you normally use for your size 9 needles when you're knitting back and forth in rows. Let's see, we have someone saying hello. We've got Leslie from Connecticut, and Leslie says, I think this project would be a great way to practice increases and use some lovely but short bits of my yarn in my stash, and the outcome will be such a fun fall decoration. Yes, Leslie, absolutely, I agree. This is a project that I do think is really great to practice some increases, and we're going to be doing some interesting decreases as well. And so that's why, even though maybe it is geared towards more of an intermediate knitter because of the shaping, I don't want the beginners to shy away from this, because this project, like Leslie said, is a really great way to learn some of these increases and decreases that you're going to find in all different kinds of patterns. So now that we've talked about yarn and needles, we just need a few other things. For mine, I used 4mm twine. And this I just ordered online, and I did provide the link in the pattern to this specific twine that I used. But obviously, you don't have to use this if you don't want to. I was thinking about it this morning. Obviously, if you have, you just want to use some of this bulky yarn, that would be fine. I think it would be really fun to even try. Maybe if you have a bunch of leftovers, like here I had full skeins of yarn, and this one I had already used for some other projects too, and this one. But maybe you could even take these and you could braid them together. If you know how to crochet, you could even hold all three together with a big chunky crochet hook and just crochet a big long chain of them all held together and then slide your leaves on. You could use ribbon, you can use whatever you have around the house. You don't necessarily need to go online and buy this, but since I did go online and buy this specific twine, that's what's listed in the pattern. Again, it's 4mm, and the link is in the PDF download that you can get in that description. And then other than that, of course, like I always say, it's just the usual suspects. We're going to need some scissors. We're going to need a tapestry needle, and I'm hoping to get to it today. I often I always say, oh, at the end of our videos, oh, block your pattern. But this particular pattern is going to benefit from some aggressive blocking. So hopefully we'll have time to get to that in today's video. So I do have my blocking mats. These are just foam mats and some T-pins, but whatever you use for blocking is great. And we can talk about we'll talk more about that at the end. So, okay, we've talked about gauge. These particular leaves, the oak leaf and the elm leaf are 5.5 inches tall, and the maple leaf is 4.5 inches tall. So got pretty good size leaf. And just remember, I know that no one's going to probably check gauge on their leaf, but just remember that your leaf may or may not come out to be that size if you're not getting the same gauge. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with the oak leaf, which is the yellow leaf here. And let's see, maybe I'll just pull. Actually, I'm going to just pull my leaves, my finished leaves off my twine here so we can take a closer look at them as we're working. So we're going to be working this one first. All three of these leaves all start with the same stem. So I'm going to demonstrate on this one, the yellow one, because that's the one we're starting with. But just remember, the stem for all three of these is exactly the same. So to start the stem of your leaf, you're going to cast on 5 stitches, and the cast on does not really matter here. I use a long tail cast on because that's just the cast on I like to use, especially on something like a quick start like this with just a few stitches. But you could use a knitted cast on, even a backwards E or backwards loop cast on will work here. And just remember, if you're new to the long tail cast on, I'm going to demonstrate it quickly here. You can always come back and watch it again. And we also have a video on the Knitting Circle website for the long tail cast on if you need a really close up, slowed down view of how to do it if you're curious. But again, whatever cast on you like. So I had my slip knot. So that's 1 stitch. We'll cast on 2, 3, 4, and 5. There's our cast on. Our setup row is just knit all the stitches. So that's nice and easy. We're on the wrong side row. Now, the next 2 rows are going to be the same. We're starting on row 1, which is a right side, slip 1 with yarn in front, move the yarn to the back, knit 4. So for all of these leaves, I've done a slip stitch edge, and I just think it gives it a little bit more structure, even though it's just yarn. I think it gives it just a little bit more structure to the leaf shape. And so I really like doing it that way. So again, now we're on row 2. So to slip 1 in with yarn in front, we slip that stitch purlwise. So from right to left, we just go into the stitch like this, slip it off, and our yarn is in front of our stitch. Now we're going to knit, and then we knit 4. So that takes care of rows 1 and 2. Now for row 3, we're going to make a little eyelet or a little hole so that we can put it on our twine or whatever we want to use to hang our leaves from as garland. So we're going to slip 1 with yarn in front. We'll be doing that for almost every single row for almost all of these leaves. There's very few rows where we're not doing that. So slip 1 with yarn in front, knit 2 together. So we're just knitting these next 2 stitches together. So from left to right, I'm going into both. So there's my knit 2 together. Oops, I split the yarn a little bit. Let's do that one again. Knit 2 together, yarn over. So my yarn was in the back. I'm just going to bring it over for a yarn over and knit 2. So because I did that knit 2 together, yarn over, I still have the same number of stitches, 5. But you can see I just formed this teeny little hole right there. And then the wrong side is the same as row 2. Slip 1 with yarn in front, move to the back, move the yarn to the back, and then knit to the end. And so that's the little stem for our leaves. And then from there, you would just start working on whichever leaf. And each pattern has the stem instructions with it. So you don't need to jump back and forth in the pattern. The stem part is included in each leaf direction. But again, just as a reminder, it's the same for all the leaves. So that's how you do the stem for all of the leaves. And now let's talk about this yellow oak leaf. So that's the one we're going to be working on here. So now we're just going to start working row 1 of the actual leaf, slip 1 with yarn in front, bring the yarn to the back to knit 1. Now we're going to do something called KYOK, which is a knit yarn over knit. And when you do that, you're going to do a knit yarn over knit into the next stitch on the needle, which is an increase. So going into the next stitch as if to knit, we're going to knit, leave the yarn on the left-hand needle, yarn over, and then knit into that stitch again. And so what we've done there is we had 1 stitch and now we have 3. So we increased by 2 and then we knit 2. So hopefully if we did that right, we will have 7 stitches on the needle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We do. Wrong side is slip 1 with yarn in front, knit 1, purl to the last 2 stitches. So you just work your purl stitch until you have 2 stitches left on your needle, bring the yarn to the back and knit 2. And then rows 3 and 4 are just basically working stockinette stitch. Row 3, we're going to slip 1 with yarn in front, move the yarn to the back, knit to the end. And then for row 4, we're just repeating row 2, which is slip 1 with yarn in front, knit 1, purl to the last 2 stitches, and then knit 2. And now we are on row 5. So for row 5, we're going to do that KYOK increase again with a slip 1 with the yarn in front, bring the yarn to the back, knit 2, KYOK. And you'll notice as you're working these knit yarn over knit stitches, it should be happening, if you're doing everything correct, right over the center of your fabric. So see, I have 3 stitches over here and I've got 4 left on the needle. I'm going to do that KYOK here. So it's like I have 3 stitches here, 3 stitches here. We're going to KYOK in the middle. So that's just one way you can kind of read your knitting to make sure that you are in the right place. So we did that knit yarn over knit. Let me take that out and just show you that one more time. So into the next stitch, we're going to insert our needle as if to knit. Knit the stitch, leave the stitch on the left-hand needle, do a yarn over. So we're bringing the yarn from the back, between the needles to the front, and then back again, and then knit that next stitch to make that knit yarn over knit, and then knit 3. And then turning it around to go to that wrong side again. Our wrong row 2, we're just repeating row 2. So it's slip 1 with yarn in front, bring the yarn to the back, knit 1, purl to the last 2 stitches, and knit 2. And so you will just keep following the pattern as it's written in your PDF download. And you can already see here, we're getting this nice shape. The slip stitches are making this nice little almost braid-like detail on each side. And then we just have a little garter stitch, 1 stitch of garter stitch running right along the side. It might actually be easier to see maybe from the finished one. So there's just this little bit of garter stitch with that slip stitch to just help it from really curling, but also we're going to block it later too. So you would just keep following the pattern, and then there are going to be these rows where we're going to bind off here, and that's pretty easy to do. It's going to happen obviously 1, 2, I believe 3 times. And it's actually really easy. You just follow the pattern. I'm going to go ahead and work the last ones up here just so we have time to do all of the leaves. So you're going to just keep working as the pattern is written. And then here I have a leaf where I have worked through row 25 and I'm ready to work row 26. And so on row 26, this is one of the places where the bind off is happening. So you would do the same bind off technique on these other sections here, just bind off the number of stitches it says on that row, but I wanted to demonstrate how to do at least a couple rows of this binding off business. So for row 26, it says to bind off 2 stitches purlwise. So normally when you think of a traditional bind off, you would go in as if to knit. That's a standard bind off. And, you know, that's the traditional way everybody binds off, but you can also bind off purlwise, and the pattern is telling you purlwise. So we're going to purl a stitch, purl a second stitch, and then bind it off. So that is 1 stitch bound off. We're going to purl another stitch, pass it over, bind off 2 stitches, and then the pattern tells you that we have 1 stitch remaining on the right needle, which we do. And then we're going to purl 2 and knit 2. And we have Katie watching from Fargo, North Dakota. My brother lived in Fargo for like 10 or 12 years. So I've been there many times. Glad that you are here watching with us today. And so now we're going to work row 27. And so we're going to bind off 2 stitches knitwise. And so now we're going to go into the stitches as if to knit and bind them off. So we're going to knit 1, knit 2, pass the first over the second, knit another stitch, pass the first over the second. So that's, we have bound off 2 stitches. 1 stitch remains on the right hand needle, and then we're going to knit 2. And so that takes care of row 27. For row 28, we're going to slip 1 with yarn in front and then purl 2. And the last step now is row 29, which is CDD, which is a central double decrease. So for central double decrease, you slip the next 2 stitches as if you're going to knit those 2 stitches together, but you don't actually knit them. So we're going to slip the next 2 stitches as if to knit, slip them onto the right hand needle, knit 1, pass the 2 slip stitches over so that 1 stitch remains. And then that's the end of our oak leaf. So at this point, we can trim our yarn and then pull it through. And there you would have your completed oak leaf. And so you could see the difference here between this is the one I blocked and this is the one that obviously I've been just knitting on today. And so it's not blocked. So you can see they look quite a bit different. This one's kind of curled up and stuff, where this one's nice and flat. So we'll talk about blocking at the end. So that takes care of the oak leaf. So now let's go to the elm leaf, which is this one. Let's see, we have a comment from Caroline or Carolyn, and Carolyn says, can you please show this in continental knitting? Carolyn, I will try. I am somebody that knits with the yarn in my right hand. So I am an English knitter or a thrower. I sort of can continental knit. So for this elm leaf, I will do a couple of the rows using a continental knitting, but then I am going to switch back to my normal knitting method. But if you do have questions about how to knit this using the continental method, even though I'm going to be showing the majority of my knitting, obviously using the English method with the yarn in my right hand, because that's what I do. We do have some videos now on the Knitting Circle website specifically about continental knitting. So that's where you're knitting with the yarn in your left hand. In addition to that, going beyond just continental knitting, if you are truly a left-handed knitter and you knit in the true mirror image, we do have a class on true left-handed knitting. And that will give you all the information you need to know on how to flip everything around if you're a true left-handed knitter. But yes, I will try to work a few rows of this one using the continental method, even though that's not my normal knitting style. So we'll see how it goes. So for the elm leaf, you're going to start this one in the exact same way, and you're going to have your little stem. Let's get our yellow leaf out of here and bring in. There we go. Okay, so here we have our stem, continental knitting. So we're doing this on the fly here. Got to get the yarn all in the right place. Okay. So we have done our stem, and now we are ready to work row 1. So for row 1, we're going to slip 1 with yarn in front. So you're just slipping when you're doing continental knitting, your yarn's probably going to be up here somehow. So you're going to just slip 1 with the yarn in the front and then bring the yarn to the back. Now we're going to knit 1. And then for this one, we're going to make 1 right. And so when you make 1 right, you go into the bar or strand in between the 2 stitches just worked. And we're going to do that from back to front. So you're picking up that strand by taking your left needle from back to front and then knitting it normally. And as you can see, I am struggling with the continental knitting, but we're going to just keep going here. I'm going to have to bring my right hand in there. Okay. And then we're going to knit 1. And then we're going to make 1 left. And so for the make 1 left, you bring your left needle in between. We're going to pick up a bar, and it's this one here. We're going to pick it up from front to back. And then we're going to knit into the back of it. There we go. So this is just a different way of increasing. And now that we've done those increases, we knit 2. And there we go. So for row 2, and we will be repeating this row a bunch of times in our project, we're going to slip 1 with the yarn in the front, bring the yarn to the back to knit 1, bring the yarn to the front to purl. When I purl using the continental method, for me, this is not easy, but we're going to get through it. So you can see a little bit on how you would do this, but you would just purl using whatever way you purl when you're knitting continental. And then we're going to knit the last 2 stitches. There we go. I split the yarn a little bit there. Okay, so that took care of row 2. Let's take a look at row 3 now. And I'll do this one continental again, and then I'll do the next one using the English method, just so maybe that'll be easier since it's a little more natural for me. So again, we're going to slip 1 with the yarn in front, bring the yarn to the back. This time we're going to knit 2, 1, 2. Now we're going to make 1 right. So we're going to insert our needle under the strand in between the 2 stitches. So in the space, we're going to do that from back to front. When I'm doing a make 1 right, I remember this as I'll be right back. Someone told me that they had learned that from Patty Lyons. I could not remember. I don't know that I learned that from Patty Lyons. I think I learned it somewhere else random, but anyway, I think that this is Patty Lyons' little mnemonic device. So anyway, I'll be right back. So you insert your needle from back to front and then knit that stitch, knit one, make one left. We're going to insert our left-hand needle from front to back. The way I remember that one, again, is with a little mnemonic device. I left the front door open. So left front, front to back. And then we just knit it through the back and then knit to the end. Here we go. Let's do row 4. Row 4 is just repeating row 2. I'll do this one continental too. We'll just slip one with yarn in front, bring the yarn to the back, knit one, then purl to the last 2 stitches, knit 2. And as I'm doing this, let's see, we have Ashley says, watching from Midland, Texas, maybe I should make some of these so that I can actually have some fall colored leaves in my area. That's a great idea. Yeah, if you live somewhere where you don't get the color change of the leaves, this would be a great one to make so you can enjoy some fall colors and fall leaves in your home. Okay, so that takes care of row 4. So let's just do rows 5 and 6, and now I'll switch back to my normal knitting style, which is the English method. So slip one with yarn in front, bring the yarn to the back, knit 3, 1, 2, 3, make one right. We're going to go from back to front under that strand and knit, knit one, make one left is from front to back, knit it through the back loop, and then knit to the end or knit 4. And then for row 6, we're going to slip one with the yarn in the front, bring the yarn to the back, knit one, purl to the last 2 stitches, and then knit 2. So what we're doing in this first little bit is we are working the increases here. So the increases, we have that kind of that center stitch right here, and then we have extra stitches coming this way and this way. So at this point, you would keep working your pattern and then start doing some decreases. So let's talk about the decreases on this one. We'll put our leaf back out here. Let me bring in my next little swatch. Here we go. And so after you've worked all of those increased rows in the pattern, then you're going to start slowly decreasing. And so here I'm going to do a decrease row. This is row 11. Oh, and Carolyn says, thank you for sharing the continental knitting. Well, you're welcome. You know, I'm always happy to try, but yes, it's not, you know how it goes when it's not your natural way of knitting, it makes it a little bit harder because I'm much, much slower at it. But yes, I'm glad that that was helpful for you. So slip one with the yarn in front, knit one, slip, slip, knit, knit to the last 4 stitches, knit 2 together. So we have 4 stitches left. So we're going to knit 2 together, knit 2. And so then we're just working another wrong side row, which is slip one with the yarn in front, knit 1, purl to the last 2 stitches, knit 2. Okay, so you would work 2 more plain rows in between, but let's work decrease row one more time. So even though I'm technically, if I was going to keep knitting this, I'd be on row 13. I'm going to go ahead and just skip ahead to row 15, just so we can look at those decreases again. So we're going to slip one with the yarn in the front, knit one, and then to do that slip, slip, knit, we're going to slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, bring the left needle into the stitches so that it's in front of the right needle so that we can knit those together through the back loop. And all of these decreases, we have videos, standalone videos for on the Knitting Circle as well, if you need a little refresher. And then this would be just knit to the last 4 stitches. Got 4 left. And knit 2 together. So again, with the knit 2 together, you're just going into the next 2 stitches from left to right, knit 2 together, knit 2. And so you would keep just following this pattern as written. When you get to the top, you're just going to be doing that central double decrease again, exactly like you did here on this one. So you would just keep working this one until you were done, and then you'd have your little elm leaf done. So this one's probably the easiest because you don't have any of that binding off like we had on this one where we had to bind off stitches. Here, we just are shaping it with decreases. So this one's probably the easiest one to start with, I think. If you're just looking for, if you want to make a garland of all of one leaf, you absolutely can. And this one would be the easiest. So that's leaf number 2. So let's talk about leaf number 3, the maple leaf. That's the wrong side. There we go. So the maple leaf, I had a fun time figuring out how to make this shape in knitting. This project really did challenge me as far as designing goes, because I don't often design things that have sort of interesting edges like this, like these leaves do. So this was really fun for me, just to try to figure out how I was going to make this work. So just like the other ones, we are starting with our stem, and the instructions again are the same for every single one. So here I have my little stem for my maple leaf. And the next direction after you've done the stem is to cable cast on 5 stitches. So let me show you how to do that. And I'll try to do this one both. We're going to have to do this twice. So I'll try doing it both the English method and continental. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so cable cast on. Normally, if you're going to cast on stitches when you already have stitches on the needle, you might use the knitted on cast on. And that's where you go into this stitch here and knit. For the cable cast on, you actually go in between. You bring your right needle in between the 2 stitches that are on the needle. So you're going like this. See how it's in between there? So you're going to insert your right needle in between the stitches, wrap the yarn around, pull up a loop, and then we're going to bring that loop around and pop it on the needle. So that's 1 stitch cast on. Next cable cast on in between the stitches, bring a loop through, and then I bring it down to scoop my left needle under. That's 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so the pattern says to cable cast on 5 stitches, do not turn, because we've cast them on and now we're going to work this way. So we cast on our 5 stitches. We're going to slip one with yarn in front, knit 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now we're doing those make one rights and make one lefts, just like we did in the last leaf. So we're going to make one right. So we're going to pick up this strand here, and we're going to go from back to front with our left needle and knit it for a make one right. Knit 1, make 1 left. Now we're going to pick up this strand. So we're going to do that from front to back, just like that, and knit into the back of it. And then knit 2. That takes care of row 1. Now let's do row 2, and I will try to do this cable cast on using the continental method. Here, let's see. Okay, so we are going to cable cast on 5. So we're still, doesn't matter which hand you're holding the yarn in, you're just going in between, wrapping the yarn around, bringing that stitch through, bringing it down so you can scoop it on to that left needle. Number 2, insert, wrap around, split the yarn again. This yarn is a little bit splitty because it's 100% wool. Sometimes those are a little splitty. And pop it on. And 3. 4. And 5. And I just want to remind everybody, as I'm, trying to do this continental knitting here, just to, give you the opportunity to see both ways, is that for the most part, there's no wrong way to knit. So if you're getting your knit and purl stitches on the needle and they're oriented on the needle the right way, you are knitting the right way for you. So just always keep that in mind, that everybody knits a little bit differently. Going out in person and teaching knitting classes, I've seen people knit all sorts of ways. So just keep that in mind. Most of the time, there's no wrong way to knit. As long as you're getting stitches on the needle and fabric that you like. So now for this one, we cable cast on 5 stitches, do not turn, which we did not turn, slip one with the yarn in front, bring the yarn to the back to knit 1, and then purl to the last 2 stitches. So you've already seen me struggle through my continental purl, so I'll just switch the yarn back, but at least you saw how to do that cable cast on using the continental method. So we're just going to purl, purl, purl until we have 2 stitches left. And then we're going to finish it up with that knit 2. And so once again, with this pattern, you are going to be doing those bind off bits, just like we were doing on the oak leaf. And it's going to be exactly the same. It's the same exact technique. For example, on row 9, you're going to have a bind off 4 stitches knitwise. We did the same thing over here. On row 10, you're going to have bind off 4 stitches purlwise. And so that's exactly the same for this leaf as it was for this one. So we've already taken a look at how to do that. So let's finish up this maple leaf here. I want to make sure we have time to talk about blocking. So for the leaf, I have worked through, I believe, round 20, 19. I think I worked through 19. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. Okay, that seems right. I've worked through row 20 and I am ready to start row 21. So we're just doing some decreases just like we did before. Slip one with yarn in front, knit 1, slip, slip, knit, knit 1, knit 2 together, knit 2. Wrong side. For row 22, we're going to slip one with the yarn in front, knit 1, purl to the last 2 stitches, and knit 2. For row 23, we're going to do one of those central double decreases. We're going to slip one with the yarn in front, knit 1, central double decrease, slip the next 2 stitches as if to knit 2 together, slip 2 as if to knit 1, pass the 2 slip stitches over. And so we've done that decrease, knit 2. Row 24, slip 1, Oh, oops. Row 24 is a little bit different. It's slip 1 with yarn in front, purl 3, knit 1. Now we're going to do row 25, and let me demonstrate how to do that central double decrease in the continental knitting method. We're just going for it today. So we're going to slip 1 with yarn in front, bringing the yarn to the back. We're going to slip the next 2 stitches as if to knit 2 together and slip them to the right needle, knit 1, split the yarn again, knit 1, pass the 2 slip stitches over the knit 1. Oops. Take those 2 slip stitches and pass them over the knit 1, just like that, knit 1. So we have 3 stitches left at this point. Row 26, we're doing 1 final decrease. This is a little bit different than anything else we've done because we're actually doing this on the wrong side. Every other decrease was always happening on the right side. So for row 26, we're going to slip 1 with yarn in front. So that's great. Purl 2 together. So that's just like a knit 2 together. You're just inserting your right needle into the next 2 stitches like you're going to purl. So they're just going into the next 2 stitches from right to left, just like that. Purl 2 together. And then PSSO, pass the slip stitch over. So this is our slip stitch. Pass it over. 1 stitch remains. And our maple leaf is going to be done. So we're just going to trim the yarn. Pull the loop through. And there we go. So once again, you can see here's a maple leaf. Here's how it came off my needles. Those look quite different, don't they? So this is one of those projects that you're really going to want to block. And you know, some of these projects I do here on the Knitting Circle, you don't always need to block your pattern or block your project. But this one, I think, especially if you're using a wool yarn or some type of animal fiber, you're going to want to give it a block. So to block your project, again, this is 100% wool. So I put these finished ones, I put them into a bowl. I have a bowl I specifically use for my knitting projects, so I don't put food in it. I put some water in a large bowl, and it is lukewarm, as in barely warm. And once I had the water in there, I do like to add a couple drops of wool wash. So you can buy wool wash online. Your local yarn store will have it, but it's basically like soap that's made obviously for wool. And so I put just a few little drops of wool wash in there because I personally like to do that. But you don't have to. The important thing is the lukewarm water. And then you're going to put your leaves into that bowl. And I like to just gently move them around, especially with 100% wool. You don't want to start like squeezing them to get the water through the fibers, because if your water's too hot and then you're providing friction, you're going to start felting your leaves. And that's not what we want here today. So you're just going to let them soak for at least 30 minutes, couple hours, forget about them, leave them overnight, whatever. But then once it's been at least 30 minutes, you're going to take these out. And I have a towel, again, it's just some old towel that I have at my house that I typically, for the most part, use for knitting or cleaning up spills. I will take my leaves and I will roll them up into my towel and then press on it. Again, I'm not going to wring that towel. You can step on it if you want to, or just push. I mean, these leaves are so small, you don't really, it's not like a big sweater or big shawl. So it's pretty easy to get the water out. So you can just give them a good squeeze on your table just to get most of the water out, and then you will block them. And so here I have my foam mat. This one is branded specifically for knitting, but it's just one of those foam mats that, you know, like they have the kids ones with the alphabets, or you can get garage flooring from the hardware store, and you don't necessarily need these. You can block these on any flat surface that you're willing to pin into. But I just like to use these because then I don't have to worry about like, for example, I have this red yarn. If I was just going to block this on like a spare bed or something, you know, red yarn has a tendency to bleed and it's wet. Like I would hate to just block this on like a guest bedroom bed and then I've got this big like red stain from the yarn, you know? So that's why I like these these foam mats, but not 100% necessary. And then we're going to go ahead and pin this out. And so before I do that, Carolyn asks, same procedure if you're using acrylic or cotton. No, that is a very, very good question. So when it comes to blocking, actually, I'm going to flip this back up to my face here since we're going to be talking for just a minute. So when it comes to blocking acrylic or cotton, you do want to block those a little bit different. So with both of them, I obviously don't use the wool wash. Typically with both, what I like to do is dry, pin them out how I want them. So I would pin it out first. Then with the with my iron on and set to steam, I will steam it. Now, you have to remember, we do not want to touch our iron to our knitting. There's a few reasons why. First of all, it will completely flatten your stitches and it does not look good. Second of all, acrylic, especially acrylic, is going to melt because acrylic is plastic. So it is very important if you're using acrylic, especially do not touch your iron to your knitting. You will be very sad. So yes, you would pin it. I like to just pin it out dry. And then hit it with some steam. And then I'll just leave it for, you know, still overnight, but really with the steam, it dries very quickly. With cotton, you can let it soak in water and then pin it out too. But it's important to remember that with cotton has a tendency to stretch and then shrink back. So with cotton, you're not going to want to like pull it out and really stretch it into an inch of its life to block it, because over time it's just going to shrink back down. So you just want to get it flat and pin it. Don't really stretch it. With wool, you can really stretch wool and it'll hold its shape. So that's acrylic and cotton blocking. So maybe that's something we should visit in a future knitting circle video, how to block all the different types of fibers. That sounds really cool. Okay, so going back down, here we go. We're going to pretend that this is wet. We rolled it up in the towel. It's still damp. Now we're going to pin it. I have these T-pins here. You're going to want rust-free because you don't want a rust stain on your knitting either. One thing I will say about rust-free T-pins, if you are someone that's been knitting for a real long time, I have found that rust-free T-pins do not mean rust-free for forever. So I had a whole bunch of T-pins because I design and knit a lot of shawls. And I had them for years and years and years. And I did start to notice after, it was like, I probably had them 8-10 years. One of them did give me a rust spot on my knitting. So just a word of warning that I don't think that these mean rust-free for forever, but they're rust-free for a very long time. So we're going to just place this down. And then you can really shape this however you want. I'm just going to grab a few here. So I might start by, we know we want this middle point to be pointy. So I start by just sticking the T-pin right into it. You can really do this at sometimes an angle. Some people like to do it at an angle. They find that that holds it a little bit better. It's really up to you. Again, blocking is one of those things that's more of an art than a science. So then I did the top one. So maybe we'll come down here and do the bottom. Like this and like this. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. And maybe we can see, we can start pulling these out like this. And so I would take a pin and do each of these little corners here where we had done the bind off. So I would stick one there, stick one there, and then the same over here. Now I'm looking at this. And that's starting to look good, but I still have to see how this is. Well, you probably can't tell. I can tell because I'm looking directly at it. But here it's still kind of curling up a little bit. So I might even take a couple more pins and even pin this down just like this. And whether I'm blocking little leaves or I am blocking like a giant shawl, It's hard to do here because I'm doing this on the video. But what I like to do is take a step back from it and look. So I would hold this away from me, or, walk kind of to the few steps away and give it a look and say, okay, where does this need to be adjusted? It's very rare for me that I've put my pins in the right place, exactly where I want them on the first try. You might decide, maybe you decide you want to make sure that this little stem here is nice and straight. So you can even put another one in. And you would just put the pins wherever you want the pins, is basically the point. Again, more of an art than a science. For me, this would probably be good enough, but you could also, if you wanted to accentuate something here, I don't know, you want to try to change the shape of this a little bit, you can. But the thing you need to remember though, is that if you just want this to be straight here, and then you go and you pull this out a little bit like this, with wool, you're naturally, once it's dry, you're still going to have these like little humps right here, which maybe you want, or maybe you don't. So if I just want this to be straight, if I want to put extra pins in, just to, really make sure it's secure, I'm going to put them in right there. So it's not pulling the fabric out and then like leaving this little like nub or hump or whatever. So just like that would be good. And then I would just let that completely dry. And then once it's completely dry, you would put all your pins away and your leaf would be nice and flat, just like this one. So from there, all your leaves are done. Again, I had knit 2 for this particular pattern, but you can do whatever you want. So once you have it done, I recommended 8 feet, I think, of the twine, but obviously that is super customizable. Cut the twine to this length that you want. For example, like I don't have a fireplace. I had this hanging up on just off of my bookshelf here in my studio. And so I cut a longer piece so that it would go all the way across my bookshelf. But, your fireplace, you might need a different length, or you're putting this somewhere else in your house, it just depends. So then all I did was just take it in and stick it through. With this twine and the fact that I used 100% wool yarn, I find that it's pretty sticky. Oh, I had a little knot in my twine there. I find that it's pretty sticky. And so once I've separated this out how I wanted it, and I had it up on my bookshelf, my leaves weren't really moving at all. They really were staying in the right place. And I didn't have to worry about like tacking them down or anything. But if you're using something different, a different type of material, different type of yarn, you might find that you want to just take a little sewing needle and thread, and you could just tack it down on the back exactly where you want to place your leaves. And just think about all the different ways that you could customize this. Maybe you have leftover yarn and you want to make some pom-poms. Wouldn't it be like really cute if you like even maybe like attach some little pom-poms in between? Or maybe you could even find, there's patterns for example, like acorns. You could even make like an acorn that's like a toy, like 3D, and put them in between. There's so many different options. And then once you're done with this, you would just hang it wherever you want, and that's it. And so again, each leaf only takes 10 yards to 12 yards, depending. That red maple leaf that I did, that took a little bit more, but the other ones just take 10 yards. And so it makes it really easy and really fun to, oops, lost my video there. Hold on just a second. There we go. And all right, there we go. So just keep in mind that this is super customizable, and that there are so many different ways that you can play around with this pattern. We've talked about different yarns you can use and how you might block them, different ways that you can hang them. You don't even have to make this into a garland. I think even if you were having a party or something and it was fall themed, or if you are, in Canada or the US and you're celebrating Thanksgiving, maybe like on your table, you could even just make these leaves and sprinkle them around. You could take the stem, and rather than working that eyelet row, just work a regular just repeat row 1 again, so you don't have the eyelet hole, and then you could just scatter them about. I think that could be really cute. So you could sew them onto some other project. I mean, there's so many different things that you could do with these leaves, and I can't wait to see all of your projects and what you do with them. So just as a reminder, if you haven't done so already, be sure to check out the link in the description so that you can download the PDF so that you can make your own leaf garland or leaf project. And if you do decide to go ahead and make one of these, we would love to see it. I hope that you will join our Facebook group and share your project, and you can share any knitting project you're working on in there. But we would love to see your garland patterns. And you can also tag us on social media, of course. In addition to Facebook, we're on Instagram and even TikTok. And we also have one thing that I really love and I'm always talking about, which is our project gallery page on the Knitting Circle website. And so there you can go and upload your photo to our project gallery and share a little bit about your project details if you want. And then we can, people can go onto our project gallery page and see just everything that everyone has shared. So it's just one more way that you can share your wonderful knitting projects with all of us. And I love to go to that project gallery page and see what everybody's making, because it inspires me so much, and also just gives me new ideas for that way I know what you guys like to knit, and I can work on new patterns based on the kinds of things you're uploading. So thank you so much for joining me today. I had a really great time. This is one of my favorite projects that I have made for these live events so far. It was so fun. I know I'm going to just this afternoon be making tons more leaves and just adding to my garland because they're so much fun. So once again, I'm Jen Lucas from the Knitting Circle. I'll see you next time. Happy knitting.